Cool. All right, so here we are, the Secret Succotash Society. We have two really fantastic, knowledgeable speakers with us today. We're going to learn about the history of okra, the history of succotash, and we're going to watch a culinary demonstration of okra succotash and learn how you can do hands-on cooking activities with students and connect those cooking activities to learning standards. And we have some gratitude to give. So we received Georgia Organics, the Farm to School team at Georgia Organics received a USDA Farm to School implementation grant this year. And that is how we are putting on this October Farm to School webinar series. And a couple of other acknowledgements we'd like to make. As you'll, I think I accidentally muted myself, apologies. I'm being told that I'm muted by my screen, but it doesn't look like I am. Can you hear me?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Great. Thank you. Okay. Back to this. So as we're all soon going to learn, this dish, succotash, that we are celebrating today is a very special multicultural dish with an old history. We'd like to acknowledge and express our gratitude to the enslaved Africans who brought okra seeds here, who brought okra to this land. And the Native Americans who were here before us and originally created this wholesome dish. All right. Let's see if I can, yes. All right, a little bit about Georgia Organics next. So Georgia Organics is the oldest statewide nonprofit providing direct support to small and organic farmers. We see farm to school and farm to early care and education as a strategy to connect Georgia families with organic food from Georgia farms to ultimately achieve our desired outcome, which is farmer prosperity for Georgia's farmers. We have a few goals. One of them is to increase the number of organic farms in Georgia. We'd also like to increase the number of kids participating in farm to school programs across the state and to increase the number of Georgians eating local and organic food. We are a member-supported organization, and we have different types of membership, different levels of membership, and that come with different perks. So I would encourage you all to check out this page, membership.georgiaorganics.org, if you are curious and interested in supporting our work. All right, and then just very briefly, everybody who's here knows what Farm to School is. That's probably why you're here. But as a refresher, Farm to School is interactive, fun, nutrition and agriculture education that teaches students the life skills of growing food and eating fresh local foods, while at the same time supporting local farmers and making community connections. So in Farm to School work, we're basically using locally grown foods to feed students as well as teach students. It's very holistic. All right, and one of the ways that we at Georgia Organics support Farm to School across the state is through our annual October Farm to School Month campaign. So Farm to School Month is celebrated nationally in October, and every year we coordinate a statewide campaign specific to Georgia to get kids across our state growing and cooking and eating and learning about a fruit or a vegetable. And as you know, we're all about okra this year. This is a very special October Farm to School Month, I think, because okra is a very special vegetable in our region of the United States. So we are thrilled to be living La Vida okra. And if you haven't signed up yet, which probably everybody here has, but if you haven't, you still can. And there is no reason not to. You only get good things from signing up to participate and live in the Vida Okra, including access to a bunch of really fantastic resources. So make sure you are signed up at that link that you see at the bottom of the page. That's where you go to sign up. Okay, so we're finally going to get to the good stuff. Thanks for bearing with me through that introduction. Before I turn it over to Chef Asata Reid, in order for you all to really gain access to the secret Succotash Society, you must answer 2 polls that are about to pop up on your screen. So we'll give you a minute to answer. Wow.
I'm going to close the poll in 5 seconds.
Cool. So actually this time I do get to see the poll results, which is nice. And it looks like most people here are actually already very comfortable cooking with kids. So that's amazing. And then a couple of people are somewhat comfortable. So we've got a confident group here. I feel slightly intimidated. Just kidding. Okay, let's launch the second poll. Let's see how comfortable you are connecting learning standards to cooking activities.
Okay, and I'll close the poll in 5 seconds.
Wow. So Chef, I hope you're seeing these poll results because
yeah, I am. They're interesting.
Good. Okay. All right. Well, thank you all for answering those polls. You are now admitted into the secret Succotash Society.
Congratulations, everyone.
Take it away, Chef.
Thank you, Kimberly. Hi, everybody. Let me change my camera so you can see my face and not my food. Hey there. I am Chef Asata, and welcome to the secret Succotash Society. You will now gain entry into the ancient wisdom of not only succotash, which is an American treasure, but also okra. And to guide you on this path to enlightenment, we have a special guest today, Miss Terri Carter. Please, everybody wave, give her a big welcome. And Miss Terri Carter, please introduce yourself.
Sure. My name, as she said, is Terri Carter, and I'll give you a little bit of history about myself and what I'm doing and how I got here. I work full-time for the University of Georgia's Cobb County Extension Office, and I've been here 6 years. And even though my main job is cooking, I also do a lot of gardening as well. So I teach gardening classes, and I'm an avid seed saver. So I've been growing okra as well as saving its seeds for many years now. So my passion is teaching other people how to grow food, how to preserve that food, and also how to cook it. So I'm really excited to be here today. And I also do a program called the Food History of the South. So if you're ever interested in me coming out and doing that program for you, please let me know. I can definitely do that either via Zoom or in person if we're here in Cobb County. So today I'm going to be talking a little bit about okra and the history of okra and succotash and how these two really came together. But first of all, I have one more poll we're going to launch here. And that third one will be basically, do you like okra? You know, we're going to be talking about okra today. So do you like it? Okay. And
I
I
love it.
happen to love it.
Me too.
Yeah. Yeah.
But when I was a kid, I didn't.
Uh-huh.
So I grew to love it.
I
And I
always
think
loved it. I don't know why. I like it boiled, fried. I mean, any kind of way you can make okra. I love okra.
ooh, look, we got some okra fans.
All right. All right. I like that.
I like the people on the fence. Those are my favorite. I like to convert them.
Yes.
Oh. There we go.
Okay.
Sorry about
So
that.
okra, we'll just go back to the history of okra. We all know okra is here, but have we ever really thought about how okra got here, where it came from, and how it became such a big staple in the South? So that's what we're going to kind of talk about, is slimy history. And that's what a lot of people don't like about okra, is the sliminess, but it really doesn't bother me.
For those
College.
people who don't like the slime, we're going to talk about how you can tame that slime as part of the secrets of the Succotash Society.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, I'm sorry. I was
That's
having
okay.
time advancing the slides.
So okra came from Africa. That is the history we know. We know that a lot of the enslaved Africans actually brought okra seeds onto the slave ships. And a lot of times when provisions is what we call them, were put on those slave ships, sometimes they came in their original forms, meaning that they still had the seeds in them. And so a lot of these enslaved Africans really didn't know where they were going. And so they would save these special seeds and replant these things. So one of the stories that we heard, and we know the story is true, is that especially the first generation of Africans would actually hide the seeds in their hair, rice seeds and okra seeds, and they would hide these things in their hair, braid their hair up, and the seeds would be hidden in there. And then wherever they ended up, they would start to plant these seeds. But the word okra comes from Africa, and the word gumbo, which gumbo is a dish, but the actual word gumbo comes from West Africa, and ngubo is the word for okra. And West Africans use okra pretty much the same way we do here a lot of times, is as a thickener in a dish. And so the original West African gumbo, it's been described as a stew-like thickened with okra, containing fish, vegetables, and shellfish as well. So we know it has a very strong history in Africa, and that is how it became so popular, especially here in the South. So okra has several different names. And what I found in studying food history is that a lot of times the same food will be called by a different name depending on what country you're in, what region you're in, and it can vary quite a bit from place to place. So okra is spelled O-K-R-A, but it's also spelled okra, O-K-R-O, known in many English-speaking countries as lady's finger. And it is called lady's fingers because some people said it looks like a lady's finger. Bindi is a Hindu word from okra, Hindu word for okra. And the word gumbo itself, when you translate it from African language into English, okra translate in, gumbo translate into the word okra. So
you
we
know,
don't know.
Terri, let me just jump in real quick. This would be a really cool classroom exploration, because you can pick different regions around the world, and it doesn't have to be okra. It could be any kind of food. And you can investigate not only what it's called, but how it's used in those different cultures. So I think this is a great way to explore food.
Yeah, I totally agree, because for me, it's fascinating to see what words is used in different languages that mean the same thing. And then, like you say, what dishes are you using? Because we use a lot of the same things, but we use them differently depending on what ethnic group we come from, what country, and what region. So it's really interesting. I love it as well. So we think that gumbo is a dish, the dish gumbo, not the actual okra, but is a mix of origins of French, Spanish, African-American, Native American, Caribbean, and German influences. So when you see all of these influences, you know that this particular plant was grown in other places in the world. So when you look at the word succotash and gumbo, it's really, to me, fascinating because it's actually the coming together of people all around the world and putting their ingredients into one dish. And that's what's really beautiful. Like they say, America is a melting pot. So the dishes we eat are also melting pot dishes as well. So when I was growing up, there was a show on TV, and the show was a cartoon, and it was one of my favorite ones. So you see here, there was Daffy Duck and the cat. And so oftentimes you would hear him say, suffering succotash. And so I never really thought about suffering succotash, what that meant. And then I was like, okay, so we're talking about succotash. Why was that? So suffering succotash is a term used, it's kind of like an expletive or saying darn or something like that without using a bad word. So they would say suffering succotash. But it's funny because nobody really thought of the plant, the dish succotash and this show. But to me, it's very interesting because the two kind of come together.
I always wonder, why was the succotash suffering?
Yes.
Why is it miserable?
Yeah. So, and to me, when I was growing up in the 70s, I loved my cafeteria. We had one of the best cafeterias when I was in elementary school. But one of the dishes that they would serve would be succotash. Actually, I really liked succotash, even though most of my friends didn't. I would say that what we had called succotash definitely came out of a can like this. And it wasn't buttered double either. It was just plain old succotash. But it being canned is not going to give you the same thing as a fresh batch of succotash made with fresh corn. And of course, it's kind of hard to get lima beans that are fresh now, but you can definitely get them frozen. So we're going to leave this can of succotash alone and move on to something much better and much fresher later on in this show, okay?
That's right.
So this is a hard word for me to say. Misquitash became succotash. And this is again where we talk about the names and the words changing. And there's a place called Narragansett. So Narragansett, there were Native Americans there. And the name, and let's pronounce this right, Narragansett, S-I-T, refers to both the people and the places where they live. Some believe it means people of the Little Point and Bays. But the name currently applies to living members of the Eastern Narragansett tribes, which is in Rhode Island. So the Narragansett, they're one of the oldest tribes of Native Americans in North America, and they date back about 11,000 years, and that's a long time ago. So if you look at this map of what we know today as the United States actually shows you all the different Native American tribes and where they were located. So depending on where you live currently, you kind of get a picture of what tribes were in your area. So if you look up to the right-hand corner, you see the Narragansett tribe actually in that northern corner of what is now the United States. So the powerful Narragansett chiefs control certain groups of Massachusetts. I'm not going to go through all of these because I'm going to pronounce some of them wrong, but Native American Indians who lived in the southern New England and New York State. The Narragansett tribe may have been the largest and the strongest Native American tribe in New England when the British colonists first arrived here in the New World. So they were very, very strong when the first Puritans actually came here. And the Narragansett, they were a very generous and a very friendly people. And so a Puritan by the name of Roger Williams made his way to Rhode Island. He had been expelled from Massachusetts in 1636, and he was warmly welcomed by this tribe. Now, Roger was a pretty cool guy. He actually wrote a book called The Language of America, and that book is actually a really fascinating book, and you can still find it online. I think it's free because I recently downloaded a portion of it. But the book just takes all of these Native American words and he translates them into what they mean in English. And to me, that's really important to be able to have that connection. But he was a really cool guy. And even though he was expelled from Massachusetts, he actually went on to establish what we know as Rhode Island today. And he was very, very friendly with the Narragansett and all the Native Americans. And he worked very closely with them, and he taught them things. They taught him a lot of things as well. And then eventually Narragansett gave him land that became the city of Providence, Rhode Island. I bet you didn't know that. But after he got there, other settlers followed, and then eventually war broke out. And in less than 40 years, the Narragansett Nation was nearly destroyed. And that's pretty sad considering that they had been around almost 11,000 years. And in less than 40 years, that tribe pretty much was decimated.
Hey, Terri, I see another kind of fun activity with your map here. For students to be able to compare and contrast the map of the United States as they know it now versus this map, this pre-colonial map. They could do it either as a nation or by state or by region. And one of the things that I've noticed people doing is showing gratitude for the region that they live. So we see on our map where we are, we would give thanks and gratitude for the Cherokee Nation and the Creek Nation for everything they've contributed and sacrificed for us.
And that's exactly what I try and do. I try and give the Native Americans as much credit for their contributions as I possibly can, because there's not a lot of them left. And I don't know if you know that the percentage of Native American women who are missing or murdered is very, very high. So a lot of times I feel as though the Native Americans can't speak for themselves. So in doing my research and doing this history, I try and speak for them and give them proper due credit as I move along. But yeah, that is a great one to look at the map and then to say, okay, and just like you say, my grandfather talked a lot about the Creek Indians and finding a lot of these Indian arrowheads along the banks of the river. My grandfather was born in 1916. So he used to always talk about the different artifacts that he would find along the riverbeds as well. And I was always fascinated as a child by that.
That's amazing.
Yeah.
Also, I spy with my little eye one of the ingredients for our succotash growing right there on that map.
Yep, that's right. Exactly. That's why we're going to be talking a lot about it today. And there it is. The main way of planting the Native Americans planted was the system called the Three Sisters. And I don't know if you've heard of this system before or not, but it's basically corn, beans, and squash. And although this picture shows what we see as our regular corn, they grew a lot of different varieties of corn depending on what region they lived in. And what I've been doing lately is trying to collect some of those seeds, the Native American seeds, and grow out different varieties of corn. And it was many different varieties of beans and many different varieties of squash that they grew as well. So if you look at the illustration on the left, you see that there's a stalk of corn growing, and then wrapped around that stalk of corn are the beans, and the beans are wrapping around and growing up the stalk of corn. And then on the ground, of course, you have your squash. And when we think of squash, it's not just zucchini or yellow squash. We're talking more so a lot of winter squash that they could grow in the summertime, and then they could also overwinter these squash. So the Native Americans planted Three Sisters corn, beans, squash together so that they would benefit each other. The corn provided a structure for the beans to climb. The beans provided the nitrogen for the soil to put nutrients back in the soil, and the squash spread along the ground, preventing weeds. So this may sound pretty simple, but actually it wasn't as simple because you had to time everything just right. For example, if you planted the beans too early, then the corn stalk would be too weak. And once the beans started to try and grow up that corn stalk, if it wasn't strong enough, then it would lean over. So you have to, and trust me, I've tried this. So that's how I know it's not as easy as it really appears. Okay.
This would be a cool classroom activity too, because it wouldn't take up a tremendous amount of space for someone who's starting out that doesn't have a bed or anything prepared. I
Yeah,
mean, you don't have to plant a lot. If you can get a
yeah.
couple corn stalks started, you do need some
Mhm.
sunshine to get that corn growing. You need a sunny spot, a
Yeah,
real sunny spot. But if they can get the corn going and then plant the beans and the squash, this would be a great opportunity to get out of the classroom, go outside and see the Three Sisters technology at work. This
yes.
technology is 2,500 years old and it is still solid.
Yeah,
Farmers
it
do this
really
to this
is.
day.
Yeah, I mean, they had perfected this technique, you know. I mean, for us to still know about it today, that tells you a
Mhm.
lot about how successful this technique was.
Mm-hmm. That's a great question, Jenna. Saying
Question.
early fall or back to school, the timing of growing these things that's a great question. This would be sort of a summer project, right? Because you need, or
Yeah,
late spring to get it
yeah.
started, because you need a lot of time and a lot of sun to grow corn.
Yeah, you probably want to start this sometime in May or at the latest, you know, in early June. So yeah, this will be something. And that's always the issue with growing in schools, is that the growing season is when school is out. Hence lies the problem, you know. And then when school is in, the growing season is coming to an end or just starting, you know, again in the spring. So succotash goes mainstream in America. How did that happen? Well, of course, we said succotash is corn and beans, and it was just a simple, noble dish that the Native Americans grew. But we have the 17th century Native Americans who thank for it. They introduced the stew to the struggling colonial immigrants. So what happened was, we all know the story of the Puritans coming to America. And most of us have heard that that first season, it was very rough on them, and most of them would have starved had it not been for the if it had not been for the assistance from the Native Americans. They taught them how to grow some things, how to get these methods started, and they probably gave them a lot of their seeds because, of course, they saved their seeds and planted things from year to year. So the name succotash is somewhat
Anglicized.
angelicized spelling of the name Narragansett Indian word meaning misquotage, which refers to a simmering pot of corn to which other ingredients were added. So we're looking at, first of all, the Native Americans used corn every day in many, many different ways. They used them to make cornmeal, so they would have it dried. They used it fresh in these pots. So they started with a base of corn and then basically adding other things to it. So that is basically how succotash got started, with this pot of corn, and then eventually beans were added.
Well, another fun thing you can do in the classroom, particularly with your elementary age kids who may not know this, is follow the processing of corn. You can have
Yes.
fresh corn, you can have dried corn, you
Mhm.
can have corn meal, and then you can use that corn meal to make another recipe that you gave us, the okra fritters, the okra
Okra fritters,
cake.
yes, yes.
Yes.
So as you can see, corn was used in many ways and many different varieties. Today, we mostly eat fresh corn, which is what you see in this picture. That's corn that you can just pull off the cob, bite into it, and it's great. But the Native Americans used a lot of what we call dent corn or flint corn, which is corn that was meant to be grown to be harvested into cornmeal. You're not going to be able to really bite into that corn and eat a piece of corn on the cob. That's not what it's designed for. So when you see all these beautiful corns, especially this time of year in the fall, just know that all those beautiful different varieties of corn that you see that we use for decoration, we have to thank our Native Americans for that. And although we use them for decorations, they didn't use them for decorations at all. This was a way of life, and they used everything down to the corn husk as well as the silk. And can anybody imagine what they did with the corn husk and the silk? Well,
Oh, guess,
they
guess, guess.
actually made toys. They
What?
would make little dolls. They would take the corn husk and they would take the silk and tie it around and make it into a little doll.
Oh,
Isn't
no,
that
that
cute?
is screaming classroom activity
Yes,
right
they could
there.
definitely do that.
Oh
And you can
my
see
gosh.
yes,
Corn
yes. So,
husk dolls. Come
yep,
on,
corn
y'all.
husk dolls. And you can Google it and make your own corn husk doll. Okay.
Love it.
So what's really in succotash? What's really going on with this? Well, there's no one way to make succotash. I can tell you that. As I said, growing up, my first experience with succotash was canned corn and lima beans. But now we have a lot of different ingredients in the succotash, because once again, this is a melting pot of things that we have brought together in America, which is what makes America so beautiful. So most often this succotash contains corn, beans, and squash. Okay, there was winter succotash. You have two different basic succotash. You have winter succotash, then you have summer succotash. And the difference between the two is, I don't want to get too far ahead. Okay, I was checking the time. Okay, the winter succotash will be made from dried corn, dried beans, and pumpkins. That's because you will grow the corn in the summer, and then once again, that flanner dipped corn will be dried and used throughout the rest of the winter. Of course, you can dry your beans. And so you would dry the beans because you have fresh beans, and then you have dried beans. And then you have the pumpkins. So when we think of pumpkins and gourds and things of that nature, a lot of times we're thinking of what we get in the summer. But the winter squash are called winter squash because, not because, as some people ask me, are they grown in the winter time? No, they're grown in the summer, but they're winter squash because they're outside skins are very tough. As like if you take a zucchini or a yellow squash, you can stick your fingernail in there and see it. But when you try and do that with the winter squash, you're not going to be able to do that. I have a squash right here. I guess I moved it. Here's one. This one I picked last, I would say, not this past August, but probably before August of 2020. I didn't do anything here, but this one has a hard shell on it. This is a butternut squash. And so that's what I mean when I say the winter squash, that they could put these away and eat off of them all year long. And then come springtime, start to grow things again. And the summer succotash, of course, was made with sweet corn, the kind that we have, peas or beans that are fresh. And then, of course, your summer squash that we know as zucchini squash and crookneck squash. And sometimes you would have dried fish or dried meat also added to this dish, depending on where you were. If they lived near the coast, they had a lot of fish, so they would sometimes add fish to it. Okay, so fast forward a century or two, and succotash evolved to become a side dish rather than the meal itself. So we see it as a side dish now, not just one meal. But of course, it can be eaten as a meal, especially if you're vegan. This is a great one-pot meal. Any number of variations now exist. The two constants being corn and beans. Usually, but not always, lima beans, which are originally from Peru. And I do love the green lima beans. I don't get them fresh very often. I wish I could. So that's why I grow them myself sometime now. The succotash is made as rounds. And if you ask people from northeastern part of America, you would be told that succotash is a Yankee dish, which in this case today, I have attributed to the Yankees. From my perspective, it started in the Northeast. Even though we consider this a really Southern dish, it became Southern because even though it started in the Northeast, we were growing these same things in the South. And a lot of the enslaved Africans also started to adopt all these different ways of cooking. So one thing about it is that when you look at the Native Americans, the African Americans, and the Europeans, although we originally started with different kinds of food ways and the things we ate, all this came together, and we brought this together, and it became known as Southern food or comfort food. And then it kind of grew out to other areas as well. So I'm really proud of what we have accomplished as far as food. I wish we as people could come together the way we bring these foods together, because we are history, the food is history, and just looking at where it all came from, it makes me very proud to see how we created this Southern food ways and American food ways. So Native American cooking included lots of corn prepared in many ways. And of course, it was a very vital part of everyday life. And as I said, every part of the corn, and also the corn cob. The corn cob was used, and I remember my great grandfather taking a corn cob and they would make that into a smoking pipe. So as you can see, every part of the corn was used by Native Americans, and we still adopt a lot of these today. So this is just a picture of the Native Americans cooking outside. Most of the time, back in the old days, people cooked outside a lot. They didn't have air conditioning, and it was so hot inside, it was easier to cook outside. And so this is a picture of an African-American woman. And what I like about this is once again, once enslaved Africans made it here to America, they were in a foreign area. They didn't understand the language. A lot of the foods were different, but they also learned a lot from the Native Americans. They learned how to grow these things and how to survive, because a lot of them lived on provisions where they may only have had cornbread and a little bit of fatback meat given out by the plantation owners. So they had to learn how to grow things. So a lot of this knowledge came from the Native Americans. And as time passed and enslaved Americans were brought to America, they learned to grow and cook these foods that are now established in our American food system. So as I said, this is just a picture of her in that kitchen. Looks to have a lot of beans, and most likely these are peas or beans that are going to be dried once again and then used throughout the winter. So for me, everything that we grow and everything that we eat is part of our history. So as you eat these things, especially fresh, and if you're growing them, think about the history, think about our ancestors and how they brought all these together. Okay, and last but not least, this is a plate of food. And if you look at this, this is something that we would eat today, especially we call this soul food or Southern food. But if you look at this still has a lot of the same things on this plate that we would grow. You see the beans, you see the corn, you see the cornbread, once again, made from the cornmeal. You see the greens and the tomatoes, and of course the okra. And in this case, the okra is fried. And then last but not least, you have the macaroni and cheese. The macaroni and cheese came about a little bit later on. Wasn't there so early, but that is how it all came together to what we know as our American and especially Southern food. And that's about all I have, folks. And so I hope you've enjoyed this, and I hope you're cooking and enjoying a lot of these foods as well. And when you do, just know that this is part of a very, very beautiful food history that we have. Thank you all.
Wow, Terri, that was amazing.
Thank you.
See, this is why you guys got to have friends that are food historians. You know, you're like, what's succotash? Oh, it's just beans and corn. Oh, but wait, there's more. Yep. And that is why we have the secret Succotash Society. You now have the history, the wisdom, the knowledge, and I'm going to give you finally the execution of how to make succotash. So you're going to be like an expert in about 5 minutes, because it really doesn't take long to put together. And one of the things I promised to talk about was the viscosity of our okra, right? Our okra. So this was frozen okra that has thawed to room temperature, and you might even see it rope. That's what we call it in the kitchen. You might even see it roping a little bit. Somebody right now is going, oh my God, that is disgusting. That is why I don't eat okra. Never fear. Earlier, Terri mentioned the traditional use for this slime back in Africa was to thicken stews. So part of the problem is you may be using your okra wrong. I'll give you a little secret. If you have fresh okra that's not cut, you either cook it very quickly. When it turns bright green, it's done, and it still has a wonderful crispness and a sweetness to it. Or you cook it for a very long time in a stew like okra. That will eliminate the slime. It gets incorporated into the dish. It becomes part of the sauce. And I'm going to do that. I'll show you that with this succotash. So keep that in mind. You may be using your okra wrong. So if you don't want the slime, definitely try to buy it fresh. And my thing is to get it pinky small. Now, okra grows about 12 feet overnight. So if you're growing okra at home and you miss any of these pinky small ones, you can use that cut up in another dish. But pinky small, they're fantastic whole. And I have to point you to some of the recipes that we have as part of the Living La Vida Okra resources. We have recipes from people from all over the world who appreciate okra and have given their background and their stories as to why okra is a wonderful vegetable that they even loved, even as children. So a lot of you mentioned you're used to cooking with kids, you feel comfortable cooking with kids, and I hope as we have talked, we've hit on some examples of how you can pull your curriculum in. There are two approaches that I do. I either look at the curriculum and try to insert food, or I look at food and see where it's relevant to the curriculum. Usually there's history, there's culture, there's always math, there's always science, because we're dealing with plants, things that grow. And we're dealing with math because we're dealing with measurements. But you can take it beyond literacy, which is reading the recipe or writing the recipe. You can take it beyond the literacy, the math, and the science. And you can go into history and culture, and you can really bring the world into your classroom and get really rich with different resources. So we're gonna cook some succotash. And it starts off with onions, peppers if you like. I've even had it with celery, but I'm opposed to that because I don't like celery, so I'm not putting it in mine. And you just want to put a little bit of oil in the pan because we want to saute these onions. And then working with your class, hopefully you go through some of the steps. Something's smoking under there. If it catches on fire, I'll have to cancel the rest of the demo. Working with the knives in your kitchen. So, you know, with an onion, it's a round shape. So you want to cut it in half immediately so you have a flat surface to work on. And then you want to practice your bridge cutting method to slice underneath here, or your claw cutting method, so that your students are safely holding on to their food, but tucking all their precious little digits out of the way. Once your oil is hot, you're going to start with your onion, peppers if you're using it. And we're just going to saute this over like a medium-high heat. One of the things I like to do if I have some time is really turn my onions down once they've started to caramelize. And then I line up the classroom. I have a teacher assisting me, so she stays to kind of watch the pan. We line up the classroom, walk the kids down the hallway, walk them back in, and tell them only using their nose to explore the classroom. And then we sit down and talk about what they've discovered. And it's always that smell of caramelized onions that gets them. They're like, oh my gosh, it smells like fried chicken. It smells like popcorn with butter. They come up with the craziest stuff of what they think it smells like. But this is a great way to jump into how heat causes chemical reactions. It's changing the chemistry of the food. And so now we have new compounds that are resulting in aroma. This is the Maillard reaction at work. So that's a kind of a fun experiment. If you're ever doing something really aromatic, walk outside, walk back in, and have everyone use their nose to describe what's going on. Now we've got our lima beans, and as Terry said, fresh lima beans are kind of hard to come by. So these were frozen and thawed, and the lima beans are the thing that really takes the longest to cook, and they don't even take very long. So I like to get them in. And then we've got our corn. Corn gets abused, in my opinion. It gets cooked way too long. People will be like, well, how long do you cook corn? You only need to cook it till it turns bright yellow, which is about 3 to 5 minutes. So that habit we have of taking corn on the cob and dropping it in boiling water and let it hang out on that back burner at Thanksgiving for 6 hours, stop it, okay? Stop it, okay? Because corn is sweet and it pops and it's fantastic, but that mush on a corn cob you got back there ain't saving nobody's soul, boo, so stop it. Let's introduce the children to deliciousness. What's brilliant about this, we talked about the three sisters being just mind-blowingly intelligent. What's also mind-blowingly intelligent is the complete proteins you're seeing represented here, because we have a bean and a whole grain. And the combination of beans and legumes with whole grains, it provides all the amino acids you need to create protein. So as long as you got some of this sitting in a pot, there'll be no malnutrition happening on your watch, okay? So that's the other thing that was brilliant. Whether they used winter corn, or winter squash rather, or summer squash, fresh beans or dried beans, you've got nutrition, very dense nutrition here, lots of fiber. And as long as you don't cook it to death, you got a lot of vitamins and minerals too. Now, the intelligence of adding peppers or tomatoes is the addition of vitamin C. Peppers and tomatoes are both very high in C. So we're going to throw this in so that the corn, the beans can cook down and the tomatoes can give off whatever juices they have. Notice that the okra is not in yet. We're going to throw in some garlic because it's good. It also helps to boost immunity, so you might as well throw some garlic around, right? And then you can do two things. You can let this kind of saute over high heat and caramelize, which is going to give you more of this browning at the bottom of the pan. For the sake of time, I'm not really going to do that, but I am going to season up the pan and then season up the spice. What am I doing? Seasoning up the dish then deglazing the pan. So some smoked paprika, because as Terry said, and notice I'm not shy. I know, I see you frowning. It's okay. It's not spicy. Go big or go home. We want these kids to eat vegetables. They can't taste like nothing, y'all. Okay, so invest in your herbs and spices or grow them yourself. We're gonna throw in some dry basil as well. It's okay. See, it's okay. And at the end, I'll hit it with some parsley just for some color. Oh my goodness, that smells amazing. So Terry said a lot of times succotash had little bits of meat in it. And the way that a lot of cooking was done back in those days was you would take some fat back or bacon or a little bit of sausage, a little bit of this, a little bit of that. Them little trimmings that come off the meat. You'd hold on to that because that would be the little bit of meat that goes in this dish. It would give it all that meaty flavor, but you wouldn't have to, you know, put the whole meat in there because that's expensive and hard to come by. So smoked paprika is standing in for our meat. It smells like bacon, period, point blank. And it tastes smoky and delicious. And I put it on everything, okay? Now, what do we do about this okra? Because it's got slime. We're gonna use some broth to deglaze the pan, which means I'm scraping up all the wonderful brown bits at the bottom because that is flavor and deliciousness. If you're using a thin aluminum pan, you cannot caramelize, you just burn everything. So you definitely want a pan with some weight on it. Also in the classroom, I find heavy pans just to be safer. Why do I have a whole tomato in here? Well, that reminds me, this is also an opportunity for your younger children to explore shape, size, contrasting colors. You know, we've got our red, our green, our primary colors, all of that. All of these things can be explored. Or it can be a review for older children. This smells and looks amazing. I wish I could just transport this to your face. Okay, let's get some okra in here. And as it cooks, what you would call the slime from the okra is going to meld with the broth, and it's going to become a sauce that coats the entire dish. So if you're used to succotash being kind of a dry dish, this would blow your mind. It's really a little more stewy than what a drier succotash would be. And yes, this would work if you had butternut squash in here or acorn squash in here. It would work just fine if you had fresh field peas or even black-eyed peas, whatever you have on hand. Now I'm gonna try and lift this up, but you can see, that's gravy. That's not even slime anymore, and it hasn't even come to a boil yet. That's really all you want to do at this point is let it heat up. And last but not least, here's a little kitchen trick. If you really want to make a sauce come together, emulsification, here's where you get to drop science, because we know oil and water don't like to mix, right? But what happens when you add some other force like vibration or heat? They emulsify. So you can either use olive oil, or I'm going to use butter because it's delicious, but we want to drop a little bit of oil or some type of fat in here right at the end while it's bubbling, because that heat and that bubble action is what's going to help it emulsify. And you literally just made a pan sauce. It's kind of like making gravy, but without the flour, because the okra is the thickener. In fact, when you study really old gumbo recipes, there's roux gumbo and there's okra gumbo. But you didn't do a roux gumbo with okra until more modern days because you're double thickening. But you talk to folks these days, they don't even know how to make a roux, but that's a different Zoom meeting for a different time. Because to take that roux would take the entirety of this meeting to make it, that dark chocolate roux. All right, so the butter is emulsifying right up in here. And that's it. Now, because we did add a little bit of fat, everything's got a beautiful shine to it. It is coated. The okra still has a wonderful flavor. It's not overcooked. The corn is turning bright yellow, so we know it's done. The tomatoes are giving off their juices. I just added a ton of black pepper because that's the secret of Southern food. Yeah, everybody thought it was Lowry's. No, ma'am. It's onion powder and a whole lot of freshly cracked black pepper. More than you would think. See all the secrets you learned in the Succotash Society? Breaking y'all off. Little salt.
I learned something too, Chef. All of that paprika, I never would have put that much, but I think I like it.
Oh yeah, because we didn't put any bacon and sausage in here. We just went in with the paprika. And there it is. Suffering succotash? I think not. Maybe satisfying succotash. Super sensational succotash. She might be sexy succotash. Oh my goodness. So there, you look at this, and I see someone just mentioned their Geechee Gullah culture. Yep. So you know what this is going over, right? Rice. Uh-huh. It sure is. It's going to go over some rice, and it's going to be magnificent. Now, if quick, fresh cooking is a little bit new to you, put a lid on this, turn the heat down to simmer, and let it go till it gets as tender as you want it to be. That's it. That is it. So it is a fun dish to make in the classroom. I find that beans and peas and little things like that have an appeal. I also find that kids like to eat off a spoon more than a fork. I don't know why. And they like to eat with their hands. So if you let this cool down, they can do either of the three. As long as they're not eating it off the table or the floor, they're doing okay. All right, I think we did post where, yes, when you go to the bit.ly, Live in La Vida Okra, you'll find the recipes, and soon you'll find the videos where people are telling their own stories. So you will get to hear Miss Terri Carter again. She gave us 2 lovely recipes, as well as a couple of other folks joining in with their okra stories. And it's crazy how personal okra is for everybody. It's much beloved, and it's a very it's a personal expression. Food is love. So I'm gonna turn it back over to you, Kimberly.
Oh, are you sure?
I don't want to torture you, but I'll go ahead and plate it up.
Thank you, Chef. That was awesome. Okay, I'm going to share my screen again really quickly. And don't go anywhere, y'all. We're not quite done yet. So I wanted to let you know that next week at the same time, same place, on Wednesday, October 20th, we're going to have our next webinar in the series, Live in La Vida Okra con mis pequeños genios. This is going to be presented in Spanish and English, and it will be presented mostly by Maria Claudia Ortega, who is the owner of My Little Geniuses, a family-run daycare in Marietta. And then at the end of the month, on October 27th, also at 3 p.m., Tasha Gomes of Food Court Georgia and Jenna Mobley, who y'all will recognize, our Farm to School superstar celebrity, will be presenting Honoring History and Culture through Farm to School curriculum. All right. And then I wanted to remind y'all also of the social media contest that we have currently going on for Live in La Vida Okra. Anybody who is signed up for Live in La Vida Okra is eligible to win weekly prizes. If you take pictures of your okra activities that you're doing with students, you post them to Facebook, Instagram, or Twitter, and you use the hashtag Live in La Vida Okra. We have really great prizes, weekly prizes, and then we'll have one grand prize winner at the end of the month. Just wanted to remind you about that. And then, yes, thank you, Kimberly. We have 2 more polls. We'd like to see if there was any knowledge gained from what you learned today.
Okay, I'm going to end the poll in 2 seconds.
Great. Thank you, everybody. One last poll. It'll look familiar. Nice. I see some positive change there. Great. Wonderful. Okay. And I think the last thing that we are going to ask of you is to please complete a short evaluation that Kimberly is about to put in the chat for you. These evaluations we do look at. We use them to help us plan future farm to school workshops, to evaluate the impact of the work we're doing, to see what is missing, what you'd like to see more of. And we use these evaluations for grant reporting purposes too, to get grant funding to continue to put on workshops like this one. So please complete that evaluation for us. We really appreciate it. And then I'm assuming that link is in the chat. I can't see the chat anymore. But I'd also like to just open up the floor for any questions that anybody might have for Terri or Asata.
I have a question.
Please go ahead, Tracy.
Thank you. This was awesome. I mean, you just brought it to life. I love okra, but the kids who didn't like okra, if they saw this, they will love okra after today. This was awesome. Kimberly, I wanted to know if Asata or Terri collaborate and with other organizations, because I'm with Extension, and this would be great to present to through a webinar with kids
Yeah,
or
sure,
just the
I do.
community. Can you share your contact in the chat if possible?
Yes, yes. I also work for Extension. You may not have been on here when I first started, but yeah, I work for Extension in Cobb County, and I will put my contact in there.
Thank you.
Yeah, I'm putting my info in the chat right now.
Thank you.
I have a question for you, Terri.
Uh-huh.
I just think that being a food historian is such a cool and unusual thing. How did you become a food historian?
Well, it's kind of, I started watching this wonderful lady named Dr. Lenny Sorensen, and she is the true food historian. And I was so impressed with the work that she did. And I just started to watch her, and whenever she would be speaking in the area, you know, I would go out, and I had the opportunity to meet her actually at the Georgia Organics Conference one year. And so I was really excited, and I just started to really follow the work that she did. And I've always been a seed saver. And my friends say, you grow all this stuff, but you don't never cook it really. That's because I'm saving the seeds a lot of times. So I'm growing things out of curiosity. And so for me, I went through a very difficult divorce, and I decided I wanted to do something to give back to my community. And I've been a stay-at-home mom, so I also needed some work. So I just started doing as much as I could in this, and being raised by my grandmother in a small rural town in Alabama. I just started to wonder where our foods came from. And then a lot of times I noticed that soul food especially will be demonized, like it's terrible. And I was like, you know what? African-American specifically, that food is demonized, where people from other countries and other places, they appreciate their food history. So I really just want to give people an appreciation for the foods that we were grown up, you know, that we grew up on. I mean, it's special to me. And I didn't want people to feel as though, you know, whatever you eat is bad, because it's the way you prepare something. You see how the chef did it? That was very healthy. So it's the way you prepare things. So all of these are very healthy things when they're prepared the proper way. So for me, it was just the love of food, really.
That's awesome. Well, thank you for sharing your love of food and your passion for food history with us. And thank you, Chef Asata. That was fantastic.
And thank you, Georgia Organics, for hosting Living La Vida Okra. Woo!